Good morning, everyone, and happy New Year's Eve day. My name is Andrea Barnes, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees and have announcements for you today. On January 2nd, the Evans Reading Group will meet on Zoom at 1:30, discussing the book Kinds of Minds Towards an Understanding of Consciousness by Daniel C. Dennett. So please join us. Thank you.
Happy almost New Year. We're gathered here today on a very special and powerful threshold. The point between what was, what currently is even, and what could be. A threshold of who we are. It's a time of new beginnings, a time of transformation. It's a time of deepening connection. And with that, I'd like to invite you now to take a moment to deepen that connection with one another. As you take some time to greet your neighbors, to welcome one another into this space, to say hello as we arrive together. We welcome you into this space. In the fullness of who you are, we welcome you today. Come, let us worship together. So we're going to move ahead to our chalice lighting reflection here, and I want to introduce you to someone. And hopefully, if you're on the ends, you might need to squish in a little. I'll try to orient you. This is a very special someone. This is self. This is self. This is also self. This is self. And this is self. And this is self. And this is self. Self is a very special, complicated, and complex individual. In fact, within self, there are many different parts. Here we have a part. You see, that's a part of self. Here maybe we have, that's actually two parts. There's a big one and a little part of self. Oh, here's another one. Maybe there's a little part of self down here. Oh, And here's another part. Self has many parts. And within self, these parts interact with each other. They engage with each other. In fact, some people who like to spend a lot of time thinking and reflecting on self talk about these parts as being an internal family system. An internal family system, a system of familial relationships that exists within us between each of these different parts. It's a little weird to think about, but one of the things I love about internal family systems is the way it invites us to use our imagination. It's not that we have these literal different parts, but we don't always understand how these parts in the self interact. And so if we give it figurative language, if we maybe give us a metaphor we can wrestle with, it helps us come to something a little more graspable than just the firing of neurons and chemicals in the brain. Thinking about parts, sometimes you have a part, like let's take this one. It's a part that really, really, really wants to eat ice cream. It's good. Well, sometimes you then have another part, and this part is the part that says, you know, you really shouldn't eat ice cream because, let's face it, you're lactose intolerant. It's not so good. And then sometimes you have a third part that is just frustrated that these two parts are having to have the same conversation again and again and again and get nowhere. Maybe you've had moments like that. This morning, I was laying in bed, and as my alarm went off, I had a part of me that wanted to get up, wanted to get out of bed, knew I probably should, and another part that said, it's okay, hit the snooze. I'll let you guess which part won. I'm here. These are complex relationships, and the examples we considered are very simple examples. But I think there are times that these internal family systems get much more complicated. They become responses ingrained in us. We'll talk more about that in a little while. But for now, I want you to meet self. To meet self. To think about self and all of those complicated internal parts that we bring into who we are as we prepare now to kindle the flame of our chalice. I dedicate the lighting of our chalice to the beauty and complexity that each of us manifests in the fullness of ourself. Please join me in reciting the chalice affirmation as printed in our order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. I'd also like to point out there are a few typos in the order of service. One of them is the last line of that responsive reading got cut off, as well as the last line of the sermon description on the back. That was my fault. I made a few edits after Carolyn had sent it over and was in a rush. But please now I invite you to join as we sing our opening hymn. Hymn number 188 in our hymnal, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. And this is a hymn I think many of us know already, and if not, it is a very simple song. And I'm going to invite us into song together. And I want us just to keep singing it through slowly. Give ourselves a few minutes of reflecting on the words, inviting all of us into the space, all of those internal parts within our being that is self. And so, And we can remain seated for this. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of the evening, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of the evening, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of the evening, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. So, we've met self. We've talked a little bit about these parts, how they maybe compete with each other, cause internal tension. There's a reason that it's called internal family systems. If you think about maybe how family systems can often have that tension. And one of the goals in internal family systems is to try to find a sense of harmony between these parts. And a major way that that is done is through understanding the role that these various parts play. I mentioned earlier patterns that are ingrained in us maybe from time when we're young. We sometimes talk about trauma responses. These in internal family systems are considered to be parts of us, these responses. They're strategies that exist in us. They're not inherently good or bad. They're usually related to survival. And thinking about the various roles these parts can play, there have been a few categories that have been named that these parts can fill. First, you have what are called manager parts. If you can't see, you can come check it out later. That's Michael Scott from The Office, who is the premier example of what a manager should be. But so you have manager parts. And manager parts do just that. They help us to manage things. They help us to manage stress. They help us to, let me find my notes here. They use strategies that help keep us on track, keep things moving forward. Often they represent our ability to control our impulses. Typically, manager parts are considered the taskmasters of the self. They're the caretakers who exercise their power and authority within the system. They can also, at times, be hyper-vigilant, critical, judgmental. It's not that these are good or bad, it's just that managers have learned that sometimes these strategies are helpful ways of surviving or managing all of the other parts. Separate from manager parts, we have what are called our firefighter parts. And think of these just like they are. Firefighters rush to the scene when there's an emergency, looking to put out fires. In this way of thinking, our firefighter parts do just that. If you think about that fight, flight, or freeze response that many of us have probably heard about. The firefighters are oftentimes identified with the fight or flight response of how we respond. And as you know, sometimes there are situations fleeing is the best option. Sometimes there are situations in which we need to be firm and stand our ground. And that's what firefighter parts help us do. Also, though, one of the sides of firefighter parts is like the manager parts. Sometimes they take things too far. as a way of managing overwhelm, the firefighter part might turn to substance use. This is oftentimes a response that many people who have experienced drug addiction or other substance issues talk about. It's that emergency numbing of emotions. It's a strategy of helping us to manage the fire of overwhelm that can happen within the self. Now, a third kind of part that has been identified, and it's a little itty-bitty part, and that's because these are our exile parts. This is similar to the flee response, or the flight response, the running away. But think of it more as an isolating. Oftentimes things become overwhelming, and our exile parts call us to step away, to protect ourselves. They serve a function. Sometimes we can't deal with everything and we need a minute. We'll talk about our superpowers momentarily, but we need a minute. We seek solitude, we seek exile. But when the part is in conjunction with the larger system and that tension arises and the response is naturally to exile, it can lead to some not so great outcomes. This is a situation when we talk about depression. The social anxiety that comes with mental health struggles that cause us often to isolate, to pull away. Again, none of these are considered good or bad. They're just ways that we respond to emotional things within the self as they come up. Which is really cool because one of the things when all of these parts come together and we think about the self is a set of superpowers. These superpowers, and they're printed on the back of your order of service, and these aren't messed up, I hope. These superpowers are oftentimes called the 8 C's, or 8 superpowers of self. And as you'll see, they have some names that all begin with C. These are the superpowers of self that can be employed in managing both our internal relationships and applied outwardly to help us manage situations in our external relationships too. Our first C is, I'm sure many of us here are familiar with, just because we're a curious people, is our C of curiosity. This is that ability to turn to inquiry and questioning when these tensions arise. What is going on in me? What function is this isolation, this exile part playing? Why is this firefighter response so triggered when I encounter these situations? Curiosity allows us to begin expanding the conversation, seeking more understanding. After curiosity, we have another one I think we are familiar with. That's compassion. Compassion for the self as a whole. Compassion for each of these parts and the role that they play. Recognizing them not, again, as good or bad, but as part of who we are. Honoring them with compassion, holding ourselves in that compassion. From compassion, we move into the superpower of clarity. I know how much my life changed when I started wearing glasses. Suddenly, I'm like, why do I keep missing a line when I'm reading a book? I couldn't see. Clarity is our superpower to engage with all of these things and to come to an understanding. It's like putting on a pair of glasses, engaging our curiosity and our compassion, and going, aha, I understand. Another one, and I actually thought of these in terms of, if we thought UU principles, we have justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Here we have our connectivity. What would we think of in terms of our principles as connectivity? The web of life, the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. Connectedness or connectivity is really about the connection here and the connection here. It's our superpower to sort of transcend the individual parts and see ourselves as part of a larger whole, both internally and externally. And again, I'll say one of the goals of internal family systems, yes, is about finding this internal harmony, but as a way of bringing it out into the world, as a way of being able to transform your other social relationships. After connectedness, we have our gift of creativity. And here's another one. I'm going to put it up here. Creativity, as we all know, is hugely powerful. It's the thing that as we're faced with challenges and problems, we're able to engage with our creativity, maybe with our curiosity and compassion, and formulate new strategies. Our creativity allows us to think about these systems in this metaphoric way. It allows us to imagine a way of explaining dynamics that have been observed within people and trying to put it into terms that, even if it is a little silly, is something we can try to make sense of. It's concrete. Creativity allows us to take things from the abstract dimensions and bring them into our world. Think of it as a force of manifestation. Another force of manifestation, and probably my favorite in all of them, because it's, to be frank, one of the ones I really had to learn to identify in myself, is the superpower of courage. Courage is that superpower of self that allows us to stand up to those things that scare us, to be present to hard and difficult situations. It's bravery. It's not saying that we're not afraid, but that we are willing to face our fear. I think all of this, and thinking about our own internal things, we sometimes hit issues where like, I maybe don't like that about myself. I notice a pattern that isn't helping me. And that can be scary, which is where courage comes in. Courage invites us into that space of transformation. Tied to courage, and they're different but similar, is that sense of confidence. As we start working with these superpowers, we start naming them and bringing them into those relationships, as we become more confident in who we are, who our core self is, are the values we hold, how those values are integrated in this system, that is where confidence comes. We're able to move into things confidently and say, this is who I am. I know it, it's all here, even if you don't see it. And our final superpower, the 8th C, our ability to be calm, our ability to sit calmly with ourselves, with our parts, with one another, to sit in that calmness, engaging our curiosity, our creativity, knowing that we're observing these various parts, not with judgment, but to calmly observe them, notice the role that they play, and decide what to do next. Self is complicated. Self is complex. And self is really amazing. When we take the time to do the work, to draw on these superpowers, I think we are given an ability to really transform ourselves, and as that is the starting point, to begin to transform the world around us. And so with that, I would like to finish our example of self by inviting Emily to play our interlude for the service.
One moment.
Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Spirit of life, open our hearts to all that we seek. Let us be part of the love that we give, the love that is possible when we come together, an understanding of who we are, how we are in relationship to each other, to the whole, to the great mystery that is beyond all naming and understanding. Open our hearts to all that we seek. Let us be part of the justice that is needed, the justice that we are called to bring, justice for ourselves, for our communities, in the world. Open our hearts to all that we seek. Let us be part of the mystery together. May it be so. Amen.
So on most Sundays, when we gather, we offer those who are here the chance to share something that is dear in their heart, whether it's a joy or a sorrow. And so I invite you to come up and state your name and a brief sentence or two about what you would like us to know about your life. This part of the service is neither live streamed nor recorded, and so for those at home, we invite you to spend a few moments reflecting on your life and know that we hold you in our hearts.
For our centering hymn, in your order of service, there's a short traditional English folk song, Round and Round the Earth is Turning, that I wanted to invite us to learn and sing together. This is a song for me, it always reminds me of these threshold moments that we are gathered at. The earth turning from year to year, always turning from morning into night. And so we'll sing it again through a few times. I'll get us going. But my hope is it's a simple tune just for us to reflect on this liminal time we are in. Round and round the earth is turning, turning, always into morning, and from morning into night. Round and round the earth is turning, turning, always round into morning, and from morning round into night. Round and round the earth is turning, turning, always round into morning, and from morning round into night.
It is such an honor to gather today, to have the sun joining us in celebration, to reflect on this end of a year as we've been talking about the threshold. And I want to bring back 3 words from, talk about the self. C word, the change, just that sense of community that we are together here today, and we have been for the last 26 Sundays. So that is a huge accomplishment. We have some attempts to build new community this year. We've had the brunch and banter have been really popular, and we have another one coming up in January. We've had some more events at the Cedar Center, and they've been really wonderful. The new groups that are meeting there on a monthly basis, spiritual writing, meditation, and so on. And transformation. This has been a year of growth in so many ways, and it's wonderful to be a part of that. And that all requires support in many ways. You showing up here, and opening your wallets to support this wonderful community. Would the ushers please come forward to collect the offering?
I was just looking, I was like, oh, I think I'm all done with my props. But surprise, we have more. may I get the assistance of the ushers to distribute these envelopes, one to each person, and I will begin our next assignment. Please wait as you get your envelope to open them. There'll be some instructions in a moment. It's many different body representations. No. It's like, not everyone. I wanted there to be a diversity and recognize that the ability to make sure everyone got a silhouette that represented their body was probably not going to happen. So, you were supposed to wait, Rebecca? No, just kidding. This is our chance to recognize the divine, to recognize ourselves in the face of another if it doesn't match you exactly. So we've been talking about parts. Talked about that, how part of me this morning wanted to stay in bed. And part of me needed to get up to be here. Mentioned that example. It's a real example I wrestle with about ice cream. And part of me wants ice cream, but part of me knows I'm lactose intolerant. Not a good combination. Parts are complicated and they intersect and manifest themselves in a variety of different ways within us. I think the first time I ever became aware of this multiplicity of parts within me was when I was in 6th grade. I knew nothing back then about internal family systems or really systematic thinking at all. But an experience that I had caused me to recognize 2 distinct parts that were within me in a situation. The elementary school I went to had a tradition of every year in the spring sending the 6th grade class to Camp Sispis for a week. It was the highlight of the school year and the thing that everyone looked forward to as they moved from 5th to 6th grade. It also represented in many ways the culmination of our elementary experience. We'd come back and the next week we would march across the one school district campus to the junior high school to participate in what we called the moving up ceremony. This trip in many ways was a threshold moment of its own. That liminal space between that 6th grade year as an elementary student being the top of our class as the older students to starting a new adventure somewhere not so near the top. On this trip, we did all of the things you would expect of a summer camp type experience. We learned archery, we went and did plant identification. I remember we made these really cool t-shirts that I had all the way through college where we painted ferns with neon paint and pressed them onto the shirts, and they were awesome. But the thing that caused me to become aware of these internal parts wasn't related to those activities. It was related to a hike that we would take on the final full day of this week of camp experience. I don't remember the name of the mountain that we hiked near Camp Sispis, but it's right off the camp. I'm sure I could have looked it up, but who has time for that? Anyway, it was a big mountain. And I remember even in May, we were told before we started, if you make it to the top, there's going to be snow. And traditionally, everyone who made it to the top got to have a snowball fight with our teachers. This motivation in itself, as a 6th grader, I get to throw a snowball at Mr. Eisminger. I'm there. Well, we set up probably about 60 6th graders and another dozen plus chaperones and all of this in this group. And we made it up to the spot where we would stop for lunch. It was this nice lookout over a valley. And we stopped, and at that point, we were given a choice. I know it's a long way still, and it's kind of steep from here, so if you don't feel up for it, you're welcome to turn back, we were told. A group of chaperones who had identified themselves were going to make their way back down the mountain after lunch. I sat there. part of me, I'll be honest, I was already tired. My legs were feeling kind of heavy. Looking back, I did not have the right shoes at all. I wanted to turn back. But I also wanted that snowball fight. Like, really bad, I wanted that snowball fight. I sat there debating. Finally, one of our teachers said, well, you don't have to decide now. Any point on the hike, you're welcome to turn back. Which felt like, oh, I can continue, I can go forward, because I can always turn back. The problem was then, for the rest of the hike, I experienced this internal struggle. Do I keep going? Do I turn back? What will people think if I turn back? Well, other people turn back, but I'm stronger than them. Well, but what if I make it to the top? What will people think then? Well, back and forth, that internal debate. Give you a hint. In the end, I did make it to the top. I got to have that snowball fight, and it is still one of my more memorable moments, not only from that trip, but from my entire elementary school experience. That was my first experience, really becoming aware of what was that internal conflict. Today, as we talked about this idea of internal family systems and that conflict. But I'm sure all of you in your own ways, your own times, have had very similar experiences. Maybe not in terms of a hike, maybe not about ice cream, maybe not about getting in or out of bed. Maybe it's been something much more complicated. Do I stay or do I go? Is now the time for me to make that move to be closer to the people who can support me? Or do I continue living my life as it is? I hear these conversations. I've wrestled with some of them with you. And I think there are many more than I will ever know or that can ever be disclosed. We all have these internal families within us, these different parts, with the roles that they play. But one of the things about starting to develop that awareness around these parts is that it gives us an opportunity to change and grow, to engage our agency, to play an active part in shaping our life and shaping who we are and what comes next. There's some of the core tenets in internal family systems are this idea, as we've talked about, that everyone has these complex parts. But also everyone has a core identity that is named as self. That core identity that is made up of the whole of all those parts, the aggregate total. So we also mentioned that our parts are not good or bad. They serve roles. That debate about the hike, do I go on, do I turn back, was about judging what my abilities were. What can I endure? It wasn't some sort of negative thing. It was about my internal struggle of how do I keep myself safe? How do I continue in a way that is sustainable? Beyond that, parts in themselves, they are believed to be developed a lot of the times based on core experiences we have. Experiences of trauma oftentimes leave us with very distinct parts. Talked about that exile part, that trauma response of withdrawing, or the firefighter part. Sometimes it's that explosion of anger. And the goal in recognizing these is, again, to try to find that harmony as a way of integrating that core self into the system of parts. The final thing, and I mentioned this briefly about internal family systems before we open our envelopes, is this. The system is very powerful, as I said, because it encourages us to use our imaginations. Creativity is powerful. Imagination is powerful. It was named as one of our superpowers of self. But beyond that, I think it allows us a way of naming our parts and helping them also grow and transform. To give you an example of this, we talked about parts being strategies. I have many friends who have struggled with quitting smoking over the years. It's something if people have ever done, it's challenging. One of the ways that internal family systems approach might take towards this is to recognize that oftentimes when we have that impulse to smoke, maybe to drink, to do that thing that we don't necessarily want to do, that impulse is born out of, that desire, it comes out of an impulse to protect ourselves. Many people talk about the reduction of stress from smoking a cigarette when they're overwhelmed. We learn to associate that, and that is where the part is formed. In engaging our imagination further, one of the ways that this is done is through actually having a dialogue with that part, to think about it in the role that it serves, to hold it with that curiosity, that compassion, that clarity, all of those C's that we named earlier, and to talk with it and explain how this role, this strategy, is no longer helpful. This is often done by giving a part a new job. Now, when I get that feeling, instead of picking up the pack of cigarettes, I'll take a walk. You are now walker part. Not smoker part, but walker part. We have a new way of sort of manifesting that strategy of reducing the stress. Similar effects, according to some research around just taking a walk, and people who smoke talk about the stress relief in there, but to shift it, to use our imagination. I think of maybe the manager part can help with that. You've been promoted. You now are walker part. We no longer are doing this. We've shifted directions. Our new mission is to go walk. Sometimes, and this is kind of my favorite, we reach those strategies, we can't maybe reassign a role. They no longer are serving us, and we can't figure out how to make that transition. You might consider then holding that part in compassion, holding that part in that curiosity, and inviting it to go on a well-needed vacation. It's okay. Take some time off. Things will be fine. You need a break. It's imaginative, it's weird, it's not for everyone, but this way of thinking, I think, helps us to start to integrate those values, those things that we hold, into our core self in a way that is transformative. And with that, the moment has arrived. I'd like you to take your envelopes as you have them, and inside there are several things. And the first thing I would like you to find is the golf pencil in there. There's a little golf pencil. And if any of you play golf, you're welcome to keep the pencil and know that it is blessed for you. If you don't, at the end of the service, you can return the pencils. Everything else is yours to keep. So first, I want you to think about yourself, who you think about. And on the front of your envelope, I mentioned there's these silhouettes of different people. This is self. This is yourself. I invite you now to take a moment with your pencil and to name yourself. It could be the name that you use now. Maybe it's a name you've always wanted to use, and just for this moment, you want to try it on, and that is cool too. Maybe it's like something you've wanted to step into the new year, and this is your chance to just once express, this is how I want to be called. But just take a moment and name yourself. Write it on the front of your envelope. Next, in your envelope, you should find a small mirror. We talked about, for those of you at the Christmas Eve service, that Annie Dillard quote about how we are here to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature. It's good. There's safety mirrors. We talked about that, noticing each other's beautiful face and complex nature. I want you to take a few moments now to examine yourself. Hold the mirror in your palm, in your hand. Notice little details. Take that time to notice your beautiful face, your complex nature, yourself. As you look, think about, are there parts that you're experiencing? Let your mind turn inward, deeper. This mirror you can keep, and I'm sure you have mirrors at home, but that practice of taking a moment to notice yourself, and hopefully not in a way that is about my appearance, but to notice yourself, the details of who you are. And I hope that from that brief moment of reflection, something is stirred in you, which is going to lead us to our next part of the activity. You'll find a small paper tag with a string, as well as a slip of white paper. It's kind of a tissue-y paper. I want you to think on these parts that we hold within ourselves, that you hold within yourself. Think about the roles they play, the roles that they play. Think about these parts. And on the tag, I want you to take a moment and write just a word, or even just hold it in your hand and think of the intention. But on the brown paper tag, let this be a strategy, a part of you that is serving a function or a role that you want to lift up and celebrate. It's one of those parts of you that is a gift, maybe, that engages with those superpowers. It's something about yourself that you see as a strength, that when things become challenging, that is a quality you can turn to. Just reflect, write it down, name it. If it's a more complicated idea, feel free to just give it one word. Continuing in our reflection, I mentioned this process of imagination and thinking about those strategies that maybe aren't serving us anymore. And how one of my favorite things is to think of these things and send them on that well-needed vacation. So what I'd like to do is invite you to take a moment on the white paper. And it feels fragile. It's more durable than it is. It's rice paper. To take a moment and think of that part, that strategy that you're ready to maybe let it take a break. As we're here at this threshold, at this liminal space, think about who could use that break, what part is ready for a vacation after the holidays, and to just write that onto the white sheet of paper. Once you have written both on your tag and on the white slip of paper, take the tag and you'll find a key in your envelope. And with the string and your tag, I want you to just attach that tag to your key. You know, not all the holes are perfect, but just however you can to attach it on there to connect that part of you to this key. Once you've done that, take that key with the tag, however you have it in your hand, just hold it. Think of this part. Think of how it's inside of you, how you use it as a tool to unlock doors. Why don't you just take it then and slip it into your pocket? Know that this is something that you carry around with you. It's part of you, it's within you. Let this key, just for the moment, be a reminder of how you carry that part, that strategy and strength. And now the other part, the one that's ready for its vacation, that's ready to take a little bit of rest, to go in compassion. I invite you in a moment, we'll invite Emily to play the harp. And as you feel ready, take a moment in reflection and come forward and drop it into our bowl. Drop it into our communal bowl of joys and sorrows, knowing that it is held within the love and care of this community, just as you have held it for all these years, knowing, though, that at times it's time to move on. So as you feel called, I invite you just to come forward, and we'll take a moment to sit in reflection. Thank you. For all the complex and complicated intersection of parts that make up the we, the us that we call self, we give thanks, knowing that at times we are ready to move on and parts of us aren't. We hold those parts in compassion, release them in love, and open ourselves to the possibility of transformation. May it be so. For a closing hymn, I'd like to invite us, and I think we could stay seated for this as well, we're going to sing Spirit of Life. And this is hymn number 123 in your hymnal. And what I'd like to do is to sing it through in its entirety twice, and then one third time, just quietly hum the tune together before ending. So I invite us now to remain seated as we join together, and I'll start us singing Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Flow in the wind, rise in the sea.
Please repeat after me as Zachary extinguishes the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May we go forth from this time with a deeper understanding of self, knowing that internal harmony is possible. May it be so.